Well, hello rally friends and welcome to my kitchen table. What are we going to talk about this time around? Well, do you know what? We have to talk absolutely about Thierry Neuville's comments, which sparked a real flurry of discussion around the service park, really about where we're at with the World Championship these days in terms of looking after the stakeholders who are already there, the Hyundais, the M Sports, and obviously the Toyotas. A lot of talk about the need to entice new manufacturers in, and that is absolutely correct. But what Neuville said was, what are we doing now? What are we doing now? And that provoked a whole lot of debate over the course of the weekend. We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll also talk, and in some ways related to that, we'll talk about the penalty for Oliver Solberg. Yeah, we will talk about it. We will talk about it. I'll try not to get into too much trouble talking about it. Nonsense. Anyway, we'll talk about it. And obviously we'll talk about where we're at in terms of the championship this year. And is it an ominous sign that Kalle Rovanperä is quite clearly showing us what's taken him, 220 odd days to repeat, which is his rally winning form. Hard to believe that, isn't it? Nearly 7 months since he won a rally. Who'd have, this time last year, who'd have bet on that we'd have a gap of 7 months between Rovanperä, the prodigal son, the all-conquering Toyota driver, going 7 months without winning a round of the championship. At the time, this time last year, it seemed almost impossible. He seemed unbeatable, didn't he? But there we go. We'll talk about that. It is a very good time for Rovanperä to hit the high notes. That is absolutely for sure. Okay, let's go back to what we said we'd talk about first. Now, there are certain folk that don't like me talking about this. They just don't. Generally, when people don't like you talking about something, it means that either they're not happy with what's going on, they're not happy with your viewpoint, or they know that they're not doing enough. Make your mind up. What I'm going to say about where we're at, it's all well and good, those in charge saying, well, actually, we don't have too much of a problem here. We're doing a lot that's right. But you do have a problem. You do have a problem because, in the service park, people of the caliber of Richard Milner are getting very heated about it. Richard could have talked all evening with us about the lack of promotion for the WRC, or the lack of direction, the lack of, I don't know what it is. Is it a lack of inventiveness? Is it a lack of originality? Is it a lack of understanding? I don't know what it is, but we're missing out on a lot of things in terms of, promoting the WRC. Richard Milner talks about it. Cyril Abiteboul talks about it, and Cyril's in a very, very strong position to talk about it. So it can't be ignored. It can't be ignored when stakeholders of that caliber are clearly not happy with the way things are. So what I would say in defence of the FIA and in defence of the promoter is that there's a very, very good job being done in terms of looking after the existing rallying franchise. So those who are already into rallying, you get a great deal. You get the fantastic all-live package. You can watch hours and hours and hours of onboards, of live coverage, of replays, of historical rallies. It's all there for you, and that is where you start. You look after your existing franchise. Absolutely key in any marketing strategy for any product, any brand, any service, anywhere in the world, you look after your existing franchise. Great. But at the same time, you have to invest in your next lot of franchisees, if you like. People who are coming on board. People who you want to come on board, the people who have to come on board with your sport. What are you doing? It's a hopper system. You pour all these people, all these rally fans into the top of the hopper, and what happens is some of them start to drop out. They drop out the bottom, and that's just nature's way. It's the way of the world. You won't hold on to everyone forever. It doesn't matter what you're doing in terms of promoting, selling the sport. Doesn't matter how exciting and dramatic your sport is, you will always lose a few from the bottom. So what you've got to do is you've got to keep topping the hopper up at the top. Now, you look at Formula One, and what they've done, they've been almost too successful. Their hopper is overflowing. overflowing. You know, there are fewer people going out the bottom than there are coming in the top, and it's overflowing. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. We are looking after very, very well those who are already in the hopper. Problem is, the level of that hopper is dropping because we're not topping it up. So what we have to do is we have to look at how we engage with other motorsport fans to start with. It's like, again, going back to marketing, going back to product marketing. You know, what you are trying to do with your product, if you've got a brand of coffee, what you're trying to do is you're trying to persuade people who drink other brands of coffee that yours is better, that yours suits their needs better, that yours tastes better if taste is what they're after, that yours is cheaper if price is what they're after, yours is more available if availability is what they're after. Doesn't matter. But what you do is you identify what the opposition are doing, you identify what the needs of the customers are, and you do your best to give those customers what they want. So who are our potential customers in WRC? Well, I think there are other motorsport fans to start with. You know, we've picked the low-hanging fruit, we've picked the rally fans, and we're giving them what they want. No question about that. All live, fantastic. Giving them what they want. But we now need to look beyond them. We need to look at other motorsport fans. So what is it that we need to give them to bring them to our sport? Well, sadly, it's not all live, you know, because, you know, that's just a little bit beyond. You know, it's too far. You know, all live is the ultimate aim for our potential people who are coming in the top of the hopper. The ultimate aim is to persuade them to get on board with a wonderful all live. But it's not the answer. The answer has to be somewhere else. And I think that's where Milner and Abiteboul and to some degrees Thierry Neuville are getting frustrated because they're not seeing those efforts. Now, what I have to say though, and again in defence of the promoter and the FIA, is that there's a lot of talk about Netflix, a lot of talk about Drive to Survive. They do this, they do that, they do the other. It's not the answer for rallying. You know, Formula One, what's it got? It's got glamour. It's got money. It's got appeal. It's got personalities. It's got, it's got that kind of, what's that, the word that I'm looking for? It's got aspirational appeal. All of those things Formula One has. And all of those things Formula One always had. They just needed to leverage it. We don't have those assets within our sport, but what we do have are many, many other assets that Formula One doesn't have. And there is where the leverage is. We travel to the most wonderful locations. We have cars that are doing things that other cars can't do on roads that every single one of us can drive on. We have cars that look like the cars that you and I drive. There's so much more in our sport that we can leverage that Formula One, that MotoGP, that supercars in Australia, they don't have. But we have it in our sport. Question is, are we using those assets we have to attract a new, a younger, a more engaged audience? You know, a more marketable audience. At the end of the day, it's about marketing. You know, the only reason that we will bring in new manufacturers into the sport, and I've heard today talk about cost caps and all the rest. Those are all tactics to get them in. You know, they're all tactics, and that's fair enough. The most important thing is they see value in the sport. They see value, they see a way of communicating, the manufacturers, with their customer base. And their customer base is not people of my age, sadly, 40, 50, 60 years old. No, we're beyond being persuaded by the marketing geniuses of Ford, of Hyundai, of Toyota, of any other manufacturer. They can't persuade us anymore. Who they want to persuade, who they know they can persuade, who they know they can influence are the youngsters, the 18 to 24-year-olds, 18 to 26, maybe 28 if you're feeling a little bit ambitious. What we're doing is we're not bringing those people into the sport, and we have to bring them in to guarantee the future of the sport. It's a really hot topic, and it's one which, as I've already said, I have a lot of sympathy for the FIA and the promoter, but I do believe that you can't afford to ignore what is being said by Abiteboul, by Rich Milner, by Thierry Neuville, and by many others around the service park, and that we need to do more to place ourselves in a position to take advantage of what we have in this sport. And we have a lot, there's no question about that. We have an awful lot to offer. We just have to get it right. You know, we just have to make it a sport, fit for the 21st century, fit for the digital age. Isn't it mad that we're saying that? Do you know, I think we've made some big progress over the past year or two, and WRC.com, in terms of their social channels, have made some enormous progress over the past, I would say, year. Never mind year or two, last 6 months to a year. It's already looking more dynamic. It's looking more appealing. When I say dynamic and appealing, again, I'm not the right audience. None of us who are really invested in rallying are the right audience. When I look at it and think, is the content that we're producing, is that dynamic and appealing to a broader motorsport audience? Well, we're getting there. We're getting there with the socials. The socials are just part of it, small part of it, but a good start, that is for sure. So, the debate will rumble on. Apparently there's some sort of meeting planned potentially for Sardinia, just to discuss the way forward. What is no good at these points is getting absolutely defensive and shutting people down. We have to talk. We have to talk. It's got to be open and honest debate where all of the stakeholders are included, all of the different viewpoints are included, and there are some very, very creative brains around the service park who really shouldn't, people in charge shouldn't be frightened of taking opinions from other sources. It's impossible to know everything, to get everything right every time. It really is. So what do? You talk to whoever you can. You garner opinion from around the service park. You have an open mind. You have an open door policy where people feel encouraged almost to come and talk to you about their ideas of the way forward. And I hope that happens in the next few months. Thierry Neuville has definitely given that door a little nudge, hasn't he? And said, come on, let's all talk about this. We'll see what happens going forward. But do you know what? We're in a good position. But for me, Netflix, we'll have to wait and see. I've watched the golfing series on Netflix, doesn't do it for me. I've watched the tennis series, doesn't really do it for me. A lot of sports jumping on the bandwagon and saying, whew, Formula One, wow, look what they've done. We can do that. Well, yeah, you can, but you have to play to your strengths. You absolutely have to play to your strengths, and we have a lot. We have a lot of strengths we could play to. And it needn't be Formula One's model that works for rallying. Formula One, when it was in the doldrums 6 or 7 years ago, came up with a new model. That's what you have to do occasionally. You can't always just copy and impersonate. Sometimes you have to actually innovate. That's where we're at, I think. The need to innovate. Now, talking about the need to innovate, we talk about the need to appeal to a younger audience. We talk about the need to be more aware of our fans, aware of entertaining the fans, giving them a little bit more. Now, one young man who decided to do that in Portugal was Oliver Solberg. Now, it was a very silly thing to do. The minute he did it, I thought, oh my word, that's going to cost him. Now, I assumed cost him would mean cost him financially, because anyone that's done it in the past, and we think back to Ogier in Spain, they've been hit with a financial penalty. That is not the case. Now, something I missed out on, and clearly Solberg's team missed out on, was this rule, supplementary regulation, which says that any exhibition driving will be punished with a minimum of a 5-minute penalty. Now, here's where I've got the issue. Solberg had to be punished. No question at all. He broke the rules, and rallying does not work unless you have a firm set of guidelines that drivers stick to. If they don't stick to those, drivers and teams, if they don't stick to those guidelines, they must be punished. They absolutely must be punished. Remember, I got into trouble about this time last year. Was it 2 years ago? 2 years, maybe more, 3 years ago. Chris Meek in Portugal, when I dared to suggest that for kicking his windscreen out in the time control at the start of the stage, he had to be punished. He did. He broke the rules. My point there was that they needed to look at that punishment in a very sensible manner, and they didn't at the time. Chris didn't quite see it that way, as you probably all saw. But there's a very, very, very defined rule for exhibition driving. You're not allowed to do it. And it does state quite clearly 5-minute penalty, a minimum of a 5-minute penalty. Now, FIA rules are written to be interpreted by the teams, and teams that win, they take the rules, they stretch the rules, they find grey areas within the rules, and they exploit them. And they know, or they hope they know, that if they get pulled up, that their interpretation of the rules is such that their understanding of the rules is such that they can defend the position they've taken. They can turn around and say, well, it doesn't say I can't do that. It says I can do X, but it doesn't actually specifically say I can't do Y. That's how you win in motorsport. You stretch the rules. You read the actual written rule, you work out the understanding, and you look for loopholes. You look for grey areas, and you exploit them. That's up to the teams and the drivers. That is not up to the rule makers, which is my real issue. My real issue with what happened with Solberg. A minimum of 5 minutes, give him a 5-minute penalty. Stick to your rules. Make an absolute point of it. Or look at it dispassionately, which you didn't bother doing. You know, you genuinely didn't. Well, there were extenuating circumstances. The rules don't allow you to give extenuating circumstances. So if you are going to take it upon yourself and say there are extenuating circumstances, do it properly. You know, the guy has done a donut in the safest place possible. The safest place possible. Go back to giving him a punishment that you've given every other driver, which is a financial penalty. If you're going to give him a time penalty, if you're going to be, you know, pedantic and give him a time penalty, take a look at the overall situation. And don't tell me this hasn't been done before, because I've seen it done many times. A driver who has had a little bit of what's the word? Not ingression. What's the word I'm looking for? He's broken the rules. Driver who's broken the rules, and has maybe he's finished first in the rally. And he's gone to the stewards on the Sunday evening, and they've looked at it and gone, if we give him a 30-second penalty, it drops him down to second or third place, so we'll give him a 10-second penalty. I've seen that done many times, many times in the past. So why not with young Solberg? By giving him a minute, you know that effectively this young driver who has driven brilliantly for 2 days, for 280 kilometres of a 320-kilometre rally, driven brilliantly, built a lead of best part of a minute, and bang, well, half a minute it was actually, bang, it's gone, it's gone, it's gone because you've given him a minute penalty. Give him a 10-second penalty, give him a 15-second penalty, give him half a minute penalty to wipe out his lead. But to give him a minute penalty with 50 kilometres to go meant he was not going to win that rally. That was way over the top for doing the safest donuts possible, for entertaining the crowd. It is wrong, it needed punishing, but you do one of two things. You either stick to the rules and give him 5 minutes, or you look at all of the circumstances. You don't say the extenuating circumstances were just he was within concrete barriers, he was in a safe place. Extenuating circumstances are, you know, look at the lead, look at the position he's in. You know, for me, it's something that I've banged on about for a long time. It's, you know, the stewards do a difficult job, and I'll give them that. I really will. And you know what? I am good friends with a few stewards, really good friends, not just acquaintances, good friends with a few stewards. They have a difficult job. What I'd like to see is more transparency and, well, a little bit more consistency. A little bit more consistency. It's not up to the stewards to take an interpretation on the rules. It really isn't. You know, the rules are the rules. You know, if you've got a part that's not homologated, in the past, if you were running something that wasn't homologated, you were chucked out. Simple as. And that was right, in my view. Then grey areas started creeping in, and well, we can accept this, we can accept that, we've got this tolerance, that tolerance, all sorts of things. You just never ever knew where you were. So I think a little bit more transparency, a little bit more consistency from the stewards going forward would help. And I think we have to address the donuts thing. I think you know, there are places that donuts are just downright dangerous and need to be punished. You know, if a driver is silly enough to do donuts in the middle of a big crowd with just metal barriers, or not even any barriers either side, that deserves to be punished. Where Solberg chose to do it, silly as it was perfectly safe. Perfectly safe. No one was in danger. The person who was most in danger was Oliver Solberg and young Elliot Edmondson. They were most in danger. No one else was. Anyway, that'll get me into trouble. Dear. That will get me into trouble, but that's my view on it. And you know, what you guys want to hear from me is my view. Let's talk about the championship then. Let's talk about Kalle Rovanperä. A lot of talk about Rovanperä, you know, being back at his best. Did he ever lose it? No, he never lost it. You know, his ability is sublime, and his ability has been sublime since he was a very young teenager. There are certain things that just weren't quite lining up at the start of the year. He hinted at maybe some personal problems with some friends back home. That's always difficult for a young person to deal with. And you know what? He won his title last year. before this weekend, I'd said to a number of people, it's very much a different Rovanperä we were seeing this year. Last year he was terribly focused. He was very focused. He was quite at times blunt when you were interviewing him because he was so focused on the job in hand. Whereas this year he's been very, very open, very laid back, very relaxed, almost too relaxed at times. But do you know what? He never lost the ability. It just didn't go his way. Now, Croatia, by all accounts, he was very annoyed by. He was annoyed by his performance, annoyed by the fact he didn't finish on the podium. And he came to Portugal with a real fire in his belly, and he put in the most magnificent day on Saturday. Friday was impressive. Saturday was quite magnificent. His best day ever? No, he said it wasn't his best day ever. His best day ever, when he looks back to it, will be a day where he beat a Tanak on form, an Elfyn Evans on form, an Ogier on form, a Loeb on form, a Neuville on form. The day that he dominates those 4 or 5 drivers in the manner he dominated the field on Saturday, that will be his very best day. But he was good. My goodness me, he was good. And he's come back to form. If he ever lost his form, he didn't lose his form. He never lost his pace. He lost his form a little bit. He's come back to form at exactly the right time. You know, sadly, Neuville is stuttering after Croatia and this one. And he needs to get back on it real quickly. Sardinia needs to be a win for Thierry Neuville. Elfyn Evans with that enormous crash, and we wish Elfyn and Scotty all the very best. You know, we hear they're recovering very, very quickly indeed. But it was a monster crash, you know, bad timing, really bad timing. He needed just a solid haul of points here. You know, by absolutely every little bit of effort that he can put into it, every little bit of skill he's got, we still have Tanak remarkably keeping himself very much in the hunt for the championship. But Rovanperä is beginning to build. He's beginning to build some momentum. Now, it'll be difficult for him in Sardinia. He is first on the road. This is the nice thing about this run of gravel rallies. I really do feel it will start to just move backwards and forwards between 2 or 3 of our drivers. You know, as you build up some momentum, you move to the head of the field, you're then penalised. Like a handicap system, isn't it? You're penalised by running first on the road in the next gravel rally. And that's where, you know, we're going to find ourselves with Kalle Rovanperä in Sardinia. The guys that have to make the most of that, 100% Thierry Neuville has to make the most of his starting position. Tanak, you know, he's talking about maybe the car just about getting there. And when it does get there, watch out. You know, he will be a real threat on every stage, on every rally. And Elfyn Evans still very much in it, but needs to bounce back again, dare I say, with a win. And, you know, the boys who need to win here are Evans and Thierry Neuville. A win for Tanak would be nice for his chances as well, but he's just slowly keeping it all together and keeping himself very much in the hunt. So the championship looks really fascinating, doesn't it? It really does, and it's great to see. It's great to see that we've not got one driver, certainly not in the first half of the year so far, one driver dominating things. Domination means an early end to the season and means, you know, we talked earlier on about the need to keep things exciting in our sport. You know, domination is one way to switch off, can't be bothered. You know, so-and-so's going to win again and the championship will be done by August, September time. We really need a championship that, much like 2 or 3 years ago, went right down to the last rally. And a few years before that, it went right down to the last rally as well, didn't it? So let's wait and see. But as I say, I'm delighted to see Rovanperä back where he's at. I'm going to have a little sip out of my mug of tea. I think I mentioned you guys, I am running out of rally mugs. So, you know, it is almost impossible, sadly, for you to join me actually sitting at my kitchen table. That would be a different sort of little broadcast, and I'm happy to do those. But your rally, your face, could join me at the kitchen table. Send me a mug, and next time round, I could be drinking out of your mug, out of your rally's mug, out of your own mug. That's my face. Can't remember the guy who did these for me, but he was very kind. And he made me look quite handsome as well, which I liked. So there we are, folks. My thoughts from the kitchen table. Oh, dear me, yeah. Am I going to get myself into trouble? I don't know. Do I care? Yes, I do care, because I never like to upset anyone. But you know what? Some things need to be said. And I do like to think that I say things in a reasonably measured manner. And you know, when I do make a point, I do like to think that it comes from a reasonable position of authority, as opposed to just chucking things out there for the sake of chucking them out there. So, Yeah, I would hope that no one will get too upset by all of that. Folks, thank you very much once again for joining me and my mug at the kitchen table.